Oligarchy. It's a political system where a small group of individuals are the rulers, usually indirectly through influencing the head of state, but sometimes even directly. People who believe in oligarchy usually think that it's an inescapable and natural structure, and they usually refer to the Pareto principle, which, applied to productivity, says that 20% of the population will be responsible for 80% of the productivity. They also refer to Sturgeon's law, which says that 90% of any selection will be of low quality, and to the iron law of oligarchy, which says that every large organization will inevitably and eventually develop oligarchic tendencies, and that any attempt to get rid of them will only reinforce them. Confederation. It's when a group of regional governments are united under a weak confederal government for some purpose where common action is needed, but they still have equal or more power than it. Confederal governments are usually created by a treaty to face critical issues such as defense from foreign enemies, economic problems, etc. The central government is required to provide support to all of its members, which are still sovereign states. Federation. This combines a general central government called federal with regional governments dividing the powers between the two. It differs from a confederation, since a federal government has much more power than a confederate one. Regional governments in a federation still have autonomy and the power to choose their own laws, but they cannot be entirely independent like in a confederation. The United States, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, etc. are examples of federations. Plutocracy. It's a society ruled or controlled by the rich and wealthy. This one is not rooted in any established political philosophy, but it's used as a pejorative to describe real-world governments. Monarchy. In a monarchy, the ruler is called the monarch, and he's the head of state for life or until abdication. The monarch's power may vary from restricted and symbolic, like in a constitutional monarchy, where his powers are limited by a set of rules written in a constitution, to infinite and exclusive, like in an absolute monarchy, where he's the only ruler. Most of the time, political power in monarchies is passed through inheritance, often building long dynasties. Republic. This term represents a state in which political power is given to the public through their representatives, in contrast to monarchy, where the power is centered and hereditary. To be defined as a republic, the representatives may or may not have been elected freely by the general citizenry. In fact, many historical and modern examples of republics choose representatives based on their personal status, with elections having a limited role. Aristocracy. Aristocracy translates from Greek to rule of the best, and it's a government system where political power is concentrated in a really small group of privileged persons, called aristocrats. In ancient Greece, this term was used as a positive alternative to monarchy, where only the best of the citizens, selected through a careful process, could rule the rest of the population. The hereditary rule was abolished unless the ruler's child performed better or had better skills than the rest of society. Some people call oligarchy the corrupted version of aristocracy, since the small group of rulers is not chosen through finding the best members of society, but usually hereditarily, often among wealthy families with big political power. Authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a form of government characterized by a strong and usually central power that demands obedience to authority and limited political and civil freedoms. For example, most classic monarchies are a form of authoritarianism. The ruler of an authoritarian country imprisons, censors, and persecutes its opponents. Totalitarianism. It's the extreme of authoritarianism, where all socio-political power is held by the dictator, who controls the national politics and the population's public and private spheres using massive propaganda campaigns through state-controlled mass media. It uses ideology to control the economy, arts, education, morality, culture, and private life. For this reason, it's usually governed by a charismatic dictator with a fixed worldview. Theocracy. In a theocracy, the supreme ruling authorities are thought to be given divine guidance, acting as human intermediaries between God and the rest of the population. A very famous example of this is ancient Egypt, which was ruled by pharaohs who were thought by others to be associated with divinities like Horus and Osiris and acted as intermediaries. Technocracy. Technocracy supports a system of governance in which decision-makers within an area are selected on the basis of their expertise in that given area, particularly with regard to scientific or technical knowledge, and supports the formation of a government of scientists, engineers, urban planners, etc. This term is also sometimes used to describe the idea of approaching social and economic problems through the scientific method. Democracy. Democracy translates from Greek to rule of the people, and it's a system where the general population of a state has political power. Its main characteristic is elections, where people can vote for laws in a direct democracy, or for representatives who make laws for them in representative democracies. Democracy has a lot of variants, like parliamentary democracy, where the voters first choose the members who serve in a parliament, the legislative branch that creates laws, and then the elected members of said parliament choose who leads the executive branch, which has the purpose of executing the laws. This chosen figure can keep its political power until the parliament removes its support. Presidential democracy, on the other hand, sees the president as the head of state and government, which does not derive its legitimacy from a parliament. This type of government relies on elections, and with at least 64 nations heading to the polls this year, Pew's latest survey comes at a vital time. While most people see representative democracy as a good way to govern their country, large shares of the public in many countries are open to non-democratic alternatives. I used today's sponsor, Ground News, to see the full picture and found 19 articles covering this new research. Up top, I can read a summary of this based on all the articles found from different political viewpoints. See any key differences in their coverage, or scroll down to read articles like this one coming straight from New Delhi, India, that says, Modi and Rahul are among the most popular leaders across 24 countries. Or this one based in Athens, Greece, that says, Greeks just want more women and technocrats in politics. One article couldn't possibly fit this many local perspectives, which is why I'm excited to partner with Ground News on this video. Their app and website make diving deeper on any topic much easier by gathering related articles from their network of more than 50,000 global sources to create these story overviews. And looking closer, I also get insight on a source's political lean, reliability rating, and who owns them, so I'm fully aware of which perspective an article's reporting is coming from. I really think their platform makes comparing coverage across the aisle, globe, and against research easier than ever. So go to ground.news/TPE or click the link below, and you'll get 40% off the same plan I use, their Unlimited Access Vantage plan. Thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Feudalism. Feudalism was based on the exchange and property of land, where an overlord gave a piece of land to a vassal in exchange for some services or political military support. This is said to have created a pyramidal social structure, where each step of the pyramid gave land to the lower steps. The king and the church, who were at the top of the pyramid, usually had more land than anyone else, while peasants, in exchange for protection, land to work on, and a place to live in, provided the lord with labor or a share of the livestock yielded from his lands. Demarchy. It's the most used political system in ancient Athens, and it consists of randomly selecting public officials or rulers. People who support this system usually say that it frees candidates from the campaigning process and makes them prioritize making policy decisions in front of them. Kleptocracy. It's a term used to describe a government mainly composed of corrupt leaders who use their political powers to give themselves the wealth of the general population they govern. It's different from plutocracy and oligarchy, since the rulers enrich themselves secretly and outside the law through bribes, special favors, or directly sending state funds to themselves. Kleptocrats are sometimes left unpunished, and they often export most of their profits to foreign nations in anticipation of losing power. Anarchy. An anarchist society has no rulers or authorities, with a focus on freedom. Its main characteristic is the opposition of the state or other centralized government entities, which it considers to be unjust. Anarchists usually advocate for the replacement of the state with stateless societies and voluntary free associations. Corporatocracy. It's a system in which the state intervenes within the economy for the profit of a select number of corporations, especially by squashing their competition through laws, regulations, etc. A variant of this system is called lemon socialism, which is a pejorative term used to describe a government that offers money to weak or bankrupt companies to save them and let them stay in the market. Socialist State. This system comes from state socialism, which is an ideology that says that the working class needs to use state power and government policy to establish a socialist economic system where the workers collectively own the means of production. This type of state may vary from a system where the means of production, distribution, and exchange are nationalized or under state ownership to simply one where social values or workers' interests have a priority. Communist State. Communist states usually have the official aim of achieving socialism and progressing towards a communist society. They are usually a one-party state and administered through democratic centralism, which says that once a decision wins through democratic voting, it must not be further debated and everyone needs to follow it, forbidding any further discussion and criticism that may disrupt unity in performing the action. The goal of this method is to speed up the decision-making process and to avoid decisions being undermined by participants whose views are in the minority. Geniocracy. Geniocracy advocates for a minimal criterion of intelligence for political candidates and voters. Most of the time, Geniocracy's main criticism of current democracy is that politicians become more concerned with appealing to the masses through emotional appeal instead of making long-term critical decisions, and that political mandates are too important to be given just through popularity. Noocracy. It's a government system where authority is only given to the most knowledgeable and wise people, traditionally being philosophers and theologians.